First, we're going to be meeting with Beth Livensperger. Originally, Beth is from the Midwest. She holds a BFA from Cooper Union and an MFA in painting and printmaking from Yale University. She has exhibited at venues in New York City, widely throughout the US, and in Seoul, Korea, and now Duluth, Minnesota. Yay! Beth's exhibition, Don't Like Mondays, features large-scale collages which depict women navigating the banal yet psychologically charged space of office interiors. Female relationships, which cross generations and run the gamut from adversarial to supportive, are foregrounded. So Beth, in your exhibition statement, you go on to say that this body of work grew out of your experiences with strong female colleagues. So I'd like to start by hearing you talk about the fortress, which is the image that is on the screen right now, and how that relates to the role women play in offices.
Sure. So this piece, The Fortress, was my reflecting on a role which is very common for women to play, certainly not meant to suggest that it's exclusively women who are in this position, but in my life, both as a worker and as a member of the public, I have found that frequently the first person you encounter when you enter the doctor's office or the waiting area or any kind of office space may be a woman behind a desk, and she's there to kind of help you figure out where you're going, deal with your complaints, keep things organized. It's the type of job, as I mentioned to Amy, where it's easy to underestimate how difficult it is to deal with your attention being fragmented throughout the entire day, being pulled in different directions and constantly interrupted. So the fortress is an image which reflects on that situation. And the fortress, as I hope is maybe obvious, refers to the desk which they are sitting in. And it's a completely enclosed desk, kind of protect and encase them there. And then there is a hint of perhaps unruly or at the very least inconsiderate customers or members of the public have been in this space, sitting in the now empty chairs. And if people can see, someone has left behind a magazine just kind of carelessly sprawled on the floor. As was mentioned in the beginning of my statement, the work is really about many facets of office life, in particular focusing on the experience of women. And I think that it's a very large part of that work is these entry roles that are very intense and maybe not always recognized as being so intense as they actually are.
One thing that struck me about your work as you were installing it is the little stories that came out with some of the characters. And we've mentioned that you really have pulled the characters from your colleagues, your mentors, your adversaries. So I'm wondering if we could take a look at Your Mother Doesn't Work Here.
Yeah.
Because I think there's some characters in there that you pulled from your real life experiences.
Yeah, and I would say there's nobody in my fictional work who is 100% some person in the world, but certainly after 20 years of working in offices, there tend to be these kind of layerings of events and dynamics and personalities. And I think one striking element of the banal communal life in offices, people talk about like your work family or whatever, is who cleans up and who is expected to clean up, who's recognized for cleaning up, and who doesn't ever even think about it. I've seen again and again the types of signs that just say, again, mostly women post, like in the cafeteria or the area where the dishes go or by the copier, that basically says it's not somebody else's job to clean up after you around here, please do it. So Your Mother Does Not Work Here is a pithy, particularly excellent way of phrasing that I came across at a job and wound up building a piece around it So in my piece, there's an additional layer of a psychological moment where this front character, who, potentially could be myself because I can be a bit of a slob at times. She spilled her coffee on the floor, and because her mother does not work there, she has to clean it up herself in full view of everybody else. And the elevator's open and there's somebody about to come in. So just those ways in which a normal day at work can have moments of awkwardness or anxiety or humor.
Can you talk a little bit about the repetition of patterns, not just in this piece, but it's a theme that you carry throughout the entire exhibition?
Yeah, I really love pattern. And one thing that I found when I started making this body of work, before I made this work, I did so much with color. And I also had pattern in my previous pieces, but it's a little harder to balance pattern and color. And so I found that with black and white, I was able to add pattern a lot more. And one thing that I think about the pattern is that it's sort of an echo of the geometry and the repeated geometries that happen in all the pieces. So we can also talk about repetition in terms of objects. So we've talked about wastebaskets, plants, magazines, clocks, and the clocks especially are important to me. In general, there is a kind of abstract repetition that comes through in the pattern that I think does reflect geometry. And the geometry I also find interesting because it's restrictive and it's regular. So it's about setting boundaries. And I think in so many ways, really, the way our lives happen at work is about rules and restrictions and boundaries, codes of behavior. I hope that answered that question. I think I went into the weeds, but.
We did have a comment from Sharon Young, and she says, "I love your work, Beth. I feel like I've been transported to my childhood with the wallpaper and furniture, but at the same time, it feels really current." And I know this is an intentional theme for you in this exhibition, if you could expand on that.
That's a really nice comment. I don't want to say that they are intentionally nostalgic because I think nostalgic is a bit of a loaded term. Like, I think it's important that we question nostalgia and what that means for us psychologically, but I'm certainly drawn to patterns and environments of the past from the time when I was growing up. I also talked with Amy about technology and about not wanting the work to reflect our most recent technologies, like the newest types of computers or cell phones that people have, because I think that can so instantly become outdated. So there are ways in which the past is referenced, but is also metaphorical. So in the left image on the screen right now, Paper Waterfall, it's referring to a never-ending flow of paperwork, a never-ending flow of data, and that could very easily be digital. But I felt the idea of the paper that comes out of the printer and just won't stop, and that is a throwback to like a dot matrix printer. That's something that I felt like made a more resonant image. We also had talked about the middle image, a detail of wallpaper from Board at Work, and that wallpaper I ordered online. It's wallpaper that features these little cigarette girls that come by with concessions in previous decades, and I have no memory of them. I didn't even realize what they were at first. But I think in that instance, the nostalgia there is very ironic because it's like, who would be nostalgic for this much more chauvinist era in which the woman is kind of a background decoration? And the wallpaper was on sale. And as I said to Amy, I could pretty much guess why, like just not so much of a popular pattern anymore. And this other detail that you all pulled out from searching the little papers on the floor was a pretty good one as well, because in that one, it goes back to repetition. That's a silk screen that had flooding in the screen so that the copies get sort of overloaded with black ink. But I felt like it also looked like an older style of Xerox or mimeograph where the copy would degrade the more of them that you made. And that doesn't happen anymore. But it's interesting because it indicates like there is no such thing as a perfect copy. Like in the analog world, everyone is different and everything is different. And so we're kind of living in the digital world, but we're still physical creatures with all of these imperfections and differences that make us unique.
And if we could take a look at the larger scale image of searching, you'll see that a lot of that background pattern, I'm not sure you can tell from this image, but each of those tiles is an individual painting. And so it's coming off of the wall a little bit. And someone did mention that the patterns themselves create a three-dimensional perspective. And certainly some of your work is literally three-dimensional in terms of coming off the wall, but you're also creating that within your use of perspective. Is that something that carries over from your painting days, or is this unique to the work that we see before us?
I think it certainly does carry over from my painting days. What I'm interested in and have been for quite a long time is the play between flatness and three-dimensionality. So if we think about the illusion of depth coming out of European Renaissance era perspective as a goal, and then 20th century European and then American modernism as a break with that goal, I think that for me as a painter and kind of an inheritor of that tradition, there's a sort of dual pull. I really am drawn to creating illusion or a sense of depth with my work and with two-dimensional materials. And at the same time, you always have that awareness as a contemporary artist that what you're doing is creating an illusion, and in a certain sense, it's more interesting to acknowledge and nod to the materials and to the truth that it's flat, that it's paper and ink, or it's paint and canvas, or what have you. So those are both very established ideas, and I think it's fun to kind of play with. Some of the work uses isometric perspective in which there's no recession. Objects do not appear to get smaller as they go further back into space. So if you look at the table in this image searching, you can see that the two diagonal lines of that black table are actually drawn parallel to each other. That's a no-no in terms of traditional linear perspective, and it was done on purpose. And yet the file box on top of the table, in fact, all three of them are drawn roughly in linear perspective. There's just this back and forth, this way in which it's impossible to situate yourself, that I think is interesting.
Yeah, and then if we go back to board at work, you have some similar patterning again, and we saw the detail of the cigarette girls, but I don't think we saw the bottom part of those tiles. And what's interesting to me about this piece is the movement of one of the characters, like following that line of the tiles, and they're like subway tiles in a way, versus the woman that's sitting there talking on her phone. Can you talk about the potential relationships between the two of them?
Yeah, one thing which has been wonderful about making this body of work is it's very different from the paintings I had made previous to this. And because it was so different, I felt really free to just do weird things that I wouldn't otherwise have considered doing. One of those things was to create a reflection, to just make a person kind of have a twin for really no reason at all. So to break the narrative logic, to break the kind of physical logic of an image was not something that I would have done previously. So when you think about copies, time, the repetition of time and clocks, I'm thinking about this character perhaps being shown as existing in two different moments. She's kind of slouching away from the desk and she's taking a little break, doing a little texting. And then maybe 5 minutes later, she's actually swiveled her chair and she's in the opposite position. And yet she's still like doing a little texting. At the same time, in another deliberate play on the idea of the copy, and of course it's a Duchamp Nude Descending the Staircase reference as well, this other figure in the boots walks across the stage, so to speak, away from the other character. So I think one thing about their relationship is it's obviously totally normal for them both to be ignoring each other and being on their phones, but also in different ways. And we talked about like the woman sitting down, she's probably got nothing better to do right now. She kind of, it's like she's either on or she's off. She's waiting for someone else to show up so she has something to do, or she has a little bit of downtime. And she's not worried about getting in trouble from the lady in the boots, you know, who is distracted on her phone. So that lady I kind of think of as somewhere on the pecking order higher than the one sitting down, but we're not meant to know exactly who she is. She could be at the top of the organization or in the middle, and it could kind of be any size. It's something kind of interesting about like the rise of WeWork, and everything is so nicely decorated, and even things like Zoom and Squarespace, like on-demand, slick-looking websites, I think give organizations and businesses the ability to sort of hide their size. Like you could seem like a bigger, fancier company than you actually are. There's just something kind of fun about it, I think.
Well, and even looking at some of the details in this particular room, searching when you have the magazine on top of the glass table, the title of that magazine is Dwell, and it's this nod towards the cultural aspect of the people that might be in that office space. It's very
Right.
similar idea.
Right, exactly. It's a narrative cue, giving us a clue as to what type of person would be in this office, when a lot of times their outfits are very generic. And I think that's more that I just don't want the outfits to become the center of attention. But I think when I give so few clues narrative-wise, then yes, our attention does focus on something like the title of the magazine that's actually from the real world.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, another detail that some people might not notice is the color of the walls. We did just keep cream, and that was intentional. I personally think it just evokes this idea of being in an office. And for those of you that have been in the space prior to the exhibition, this room was all black. And I absolutely think, Beth, your work would fit in with a black background, but it would completely change the feeling and the dynamic. And one of the ways I think you've created that office space feeling is by including the elevators.
Yeah, so the elevators came about in two ways. I've made more of these pieces, these collage / installations that I can mix and match. This lady who has the paper kind of spilling out, she had served in board at work as part of it at one point when I had it up in a studio with a really huge wall. And then afterwards, I realized that I would never have such a long wall again. And so she became a bit homeless for a while. And then I was asked to do a piece for an art fair in New York City. The space had two freestanding panels of a particular size, like 6 by 7 feet. And it was in a former corporate office space. And I thought, well, what can I do with these weird panels? And I realized they did kind of look like elevators. So I decided that it would be really interesting to extend the office environment and kind of move into some of these areas that lead up to the office and with which we still have such a repetitive relationship. It's part of the 40-hour week routine, like hit the button, get in the elevator, get irritated because the doors always take so long to close, and da da da. So the alcove in the Morrison Gallery, I thought was absolutely perfect for the elevators, and to have one closed and one open, and you have to come around the corner before you see them, which I think is often the case with the elevators anyway. You're kind of looking around for them and they're around the corner. And so that was just a really fun opportunity to play with that space. And I think it really works very well in that snug alcove.
Yes, I agree. And I think all of your work fits so well into the Morrison Gallery. I was really excited when you started laying out all the pieces, and they just all seem to flow really well together. So I do want to be conscious of time. I've been trying to get to all the chat questions, but last minute plea for questions for Beth. So we'll still have time to visit with the Like Me, Like You artists.
Robin Washington had a question. He said, we've had a number of works at the DAI recently where the art comes out of the wall. What was your inspiration or influence for this technique?
You know, so the nature of paper is like you pin it to the wall, and when you're cutting out separate pieces, if you don't pin every little part of it, it's going to start to sort of flop or move a little with humidity. And from almost the beginning, just working with the paper on the wall, I realized that that would happen. And so I think after that sort of stewed a bit, I thought, well, that's part of the nature of the material, and that's something that I could exploit. And so the one that's called Paper Waterfall, where the paper comes onto the floor, was the first time I did that on purpose. And since then, I've been thinking about ways in which I can use paper three-dimensionally without, however, turning myself into a sculptor, which is something I'm simply not ready to do. To answer the question, where did it come about to have something coming out from the wall? I think it really was coming from the nature of the materials and realizing that that was possible and would kind of make sense with a material that can fold and bend and be rolled and then be pinned and hold its shape. I'm trying to always keep in mind other things that paper might want to do rather than things that I could force it to do, but which might be a bit more awkward.
There was another question that kind of touches on this as well, especially with paper being so fragile. Someone had asked, how do you transport and ship and store your work when you're bringing it place to place?
They're in the studio. They are in very large cardboard sleeves. And I have painting racks and they stand upright, but they're kind of like wedged in tight so that the paper can't slump down in the sleeves. When I shipped it out to DAI, it was quite a production. I rolled it in tubes. I used sonotubes for cement that you can get at the lumberyard, and had to make cardboard caps for them. So the paper can be rolled. It's not a perfect solution, but that's certainly possible. I wouldn't do it long term. This is also 140-pound watercolor paper, so it's a bit heavier and it's a bit more sturdy than a lot of types of paper.
There's one more question from a Jennifer Lean. Given the pandemic season of most huge office buildings being closed, how do you feel that the work might resonate differently for you right now during this pandemic?
I did make a piece during the pandemic that was called Remote, and it was like 2 empty conference tables with nobody at them. I think it's obviously like we all hate the grind of going to the office and the commute, and people make a hobby out of complaining about office jobs, and it's kind of like a joke, but I think there was a communal sense that was lost and really has not been replaced by the digital. I don't know how the work will change in response to the pandemic because I don't think we're through it or have a grasp on the impact of the changes that we've made and the changes that will continue to be made. I mean, it's on such a macro level that it's driving populations shifting from state to state, which is just wild. We'll see what kind of shakes out of it, but I certainly think that as a human and as an artist, I'll continue to think about it, and I'm sure that my work will change in years to come in response to it.
Thank you so much, Beth. It's been a pleasure having you at the Art Institute and at the event tonight. Reminder to everyone that Beth's work will be on view until April 3rd. And you can also catch some more of her explanations on our Smartify. I think there's even several pictures of a piece that is not included in this exhibition. So if you want to learn more about Beth's work, make sure to pick up that app, or there's also a URL that you can link to.
Thank you so much, Amy.
All right, thank you, Beth. Like Me, Like You is on view at the Duluth Art Institute's John Steffl Gallery through mid-March. Reminder that the galleries are open daily from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can hear some of the stories on the DAA Smartify app as well. And that link will be on our website soon. Because this exhibition is so community oriented, I wanted to open by reading some of the comments left by recent viewers to the exhibition in our guest book. January 11th, we hear, "Thank you, moving, touching, eye-opening," from the adoptive parents of a Korean son. On January 20th, "Thank you for your efforts in building harmony when needed most." And most recently this week, a very important work, "Messages that need to be seen and heard." Consistently, the feedback that we've been receiving on this exhibition has been centered around gratitude in hearing the stories from the artists in the exhibition. So tonight we're going to start by meeting with Julie Kim, as her story was the first one committed to the exhibition. And I'm just going to read a little bit about Julie Kim, the gallery guide that you can find in the galleries created by Julia Cheng. Julie Kim is a Korean adoptee and was raised in the Twin Cities. She completed her undergraduate and master's in social work at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. She has lived in Duluth since 1991 and worked in the mental health field for over 30 years. Julie is currently a counselor at UMD Health Services. So welcome, Julie. We're excited to hear you talk a little bit about your work in the show.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you for this opportunity. My piece is Diptych, which is a collaboration that I did with my dear friend Julia Chang, and so grateful for her artistry and direction. So on the left-hand side is one of the first pictures that my adoptive mother received when I was in the orphanage. And then on the other side is a current picture of me with a longer bang, just to let you know. But this has been an amazing long journey in terms of being a Korean adoptee growing up in the United States. And so it's hard to believe that my story is actually being told in public because it's been such a private journey for myself. The earliest picture will be 50 years old next month. And so it's pretty incredible just to look back at the 3-year-old me. The title of the piece is called A Long Journey because it has been a long journey as being an adoptee. My journey starts as an involuntary immigrant. My beginning and the history is actually unknown. For the first 3 years of my life, it's hard to think about not knowing or remembering what happened during that time. And so it's as if my life started when I was adopted. I would hear very eerily similar stories with other Korean adoptees about how they were put in Korean orphanages, not knowing the real truth as well about that piece of my life is something that I've had to accept over time. The long journey is also about challenges and tribulations of being adopted and being referred to as the other, and to have to justify why I belong here. It's been a long journey of creating an identity of my own. I talk more about that in the podcast, but it has been, how do you go from a place of being Korean to coming to America and being a Korean adoptee and everything that goes along with that. Being surrounded with the other artists and the TPAC members and allies has contributed to finally making my story my own without having to be asked, what is my adoption story? It's really contributed to my own healing. It's also a story that I want to share, and this was also a motivation why I decided to do that. I wanted to make sure that other Korean and transracial adoptees would know that they are not alone in their own personal journey as they progress. In addition, I wanted to talk briefly about Dahi Kim and Matthew Koshmrl. They weren't able to be with us, but they also have a film called The Big Happiness that's also part of the exhibit. Dahi on the left is talking with another Korean adoptee when she was in Korea, and the picture on the right is dinner table conversation with her adoptive parents. So many of her experiences were familiar to mine when I watched the film last summer. And it highlights Dahi's personal exploration of adoption, identity, and color blindness growing up in a transracial family. The next artist who I'm honored to introduce is Julia Chang. Julia Chang is on the TPAC's leadership team and also a past co-chair of Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial Incorporated. She'll graduate this summer from the UMD's Leibovitz School of Business and Economics with an accounting degree. Julia was a photojournalist in Massachusetts, California, and Minnesota for 16 years before entering the financial services field. She directed Greater Minnesota's largest volunteer tax assistance program for 8 years, training hundreds of community members to prepare tax returns for their neighbors and developing a passion for achieving social justice through economic empowerment. Like Me, Like You is the second state-funded community arts project that Julia has helped organize in Duluth after the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial Centennial Concert of March 2020.
Thank you, Julie. Not too long after TPAC organized last spring, the Duluth Art Institute invited us to create an exhibit about the APIDA community. When I first thought about this show, I thought it would be about a sense of displacement. And you do see the pain of separation, of our parents who left their homes and their families of origin, the adoptees who were uprooted from their Korean culture. These are my parents. My mother is watching my father being cared for by nurses at the Hillcrest Hospital after he had a stroke, and he never really recovered from that. This is the first time that I've shown these images in public. When I did these photos, I was kind of at the height of my maturity as a photojournalist. I had to emotionally disengage a little bit to do these photos, but as painful as it is to look at them 20 years later almost, I'm glad that I recorded it. So yes, I thought it would be about displacement, but as we installed the separate works that we created individually, I felt that a greater truth and a deeper joy emerged that we have made a place for ourselves here in this community. It came through the courage of our immigrant parents. It came from the love of the families that parents have for their children, children and the parents, and it came through the strong friendships that we've developed with each other. This is a father and daughter that I photographed in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. They are rehearsing Laotian traditional dance. I am really grateful for the friendship that I have developed with my TPAC sisters. And it's one of the reasons that I know that we've made homes for ourselves here and that we continue to contribute to the fabric that is America. We are dealing with trauma of racism. Our tools for resisting the heightened anti-Asian hostility of the pandemic era are speaking our truth out loud and standing with our BIPOC sisters and brothers. So like me, like you, is very much a team effort of the project artists, the TPAC Key Volunteer Organizing Committee, and community members. And you'll see this most visibly in Viann Nguyen-Feng's canvases and origami representation of TPAC's logo. Our collaboration, which is lifting each other up along this 10-month journey of putting the show together, is what brings cohesion to the individual works of this exhibit. This show is more than we ever imagined it could be, and we are also grateful and honored to make this gift to our community. That's about all that I want to say. So I'm going to start by introducing Pakou Lee. She is a Hmong refugee who arrived in the United States at the age of 4 as Laos was under siege by communist forces. Her family first resettled in Iowa before moving to Minnesota to join other Hmong families. Pakou has over 2 decades of experience in public service, community engagement, and advocacy. She relocated to Duluth in 2006 and has worked in the nonprofit sector and conducted communications and public relations for the city of Duluth. She currently works for the Lloyd K. Johnson Foundation and is a member of the Twin Ports APIDA Collective, one of the founding members of the St. Luke's Board of Trustees and the St. Luke's Foundation. She earned a master's in public policy from the University of Minnesota's Hubert H. Humphreys School of Public Affairs.
Thank you, Julia. When my family came to the United States in 1976, they brought a suitcase of the most important possessions that they had that they could pack very quickly in order for them to be able to get on a plane safely and arrive in the refugee camps in Thailand. Within that suitcase were just a couple of items that my mother had handmade. So she carried all of her memories. She carried her heart. She carried the love of her ancestors with her to America and rebuilt a life here, supporting my father, supporting all of our 7 children. And though she never made it a livelihood, being able to make the Hmong outfit that you see on display, for me, I'm the 3rd daughter, the youngest daughter, was a really significant point in our relationship, because it was, at the time, I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, but it was a kind of like a final gift. I look back and it was probably the last thing she ever made, using her skills and her talent. And it was a way for her to, preserve the skills that she had of making Hmong tapestry and being able to sew a beautiful outfit for her daughter as a gift. And so this gift is something that I was able to wear at the Hmong New Year in the Twin Cities, but it was also gifted to me when I got married because it was part of my dowry that my parents had put together for me. It's something that I cherish. So part of the display not only shows the extent of a mother's love, because now that she's approaching 80, her hands are arthritic and she no longer can sew and she no longer can create those wonderful things for me. But it shows how much I meant to her. And it also shows the fact that she wanted to be able to preserve those skills and wanted to show me just how important it was that as Hmong women, we have that love and that bond that we pass on from generation to generation. So I thank everybody who has visited the exhibit. I thank all of my TPAC cohorts who have put together this really incredible, unique exhibit. And I hope that we're able to share even more with everyone moving forward. And now it's my honor to introduce Sharon Young, who is a Minnesota-born Chinese American. Sharon has worked in the medical field and jumped into running a business for herself here in Duluth. And it stems from her family's experience running a Chinese restaurant in Minneapolis. Sharon currently is a regional manager for a national publication magazine and contributed the beautiful beaded embroidery that's hanging on the walls, not to mention the 5 podcast interviews that you get to hear when you walk into the exhibit. Sharon?
Thanks so much, Pakou. Well, welcome everybody. It's really nice to see some familiar faces in the group, and I'm glad we could do this, at least via Zoom, safely. I just want to talk about these podcasts. This project specifically was really obviously not about me. Really wanted a platform where I could have, I guess, some conversations that are pretty intimate that people were willing to share, because I've had these kind of conversations with people. I hang up the phone and I realized, oh, I wish other people could have heard their story, right? So it was always a little bit of a dream for me to record some of the conversations and share them publicly, but to really do this in a formal way. This exhibit really allowed me to do that small scale. And I'm very appreciative of the 5 individual people and family members that were able to trust me and share their story. If you have even your smartphone right now, you can hold your smartphone up to the QR code and you can listen at your own time. The podcasts are very shortened, so it gives you a taste of what the conversations are. Listen to them in the car, listen to them with your family, and just open your heart to where it's coming from. You'll hear a lot of emotion and just truth. And these are people in your community. And I hope that someday you can meet them out in public. You know, if you see them out in our community, either volunteering or on a board or just at the grocery store, maybe you'll run into them. Their pictures are here and they've allowed us to do that. And I hope you do that. The stories are all different. One of the families is a father-son group. Very interesting to have them on the same recording. That was very special. So if you ever have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to make a formal introduction. And next, I can talk really briefly about this embroidery. So if any of you are crafty, you'll know cross stitch and embroidery with beading. It's not really complicated. You compare this work to Beth's, not really comparable because small school children can do this. But I want to explain why this was really important to me. My mother, who immigrated from China and Hong Kong, she grew up in Hong Kong. She, as an older adult, traveled to China by herself. She went back as an adult, as a tourist. Kind of fascinating to be able to be in the United States and then travel back by yourself. She went back and traveled the country. And she showed me everything that she had gotten, knickknacks and things. And she brought back this cross stitch pattern with the beads. And if you know my mother, she's a highly, highly skilled seamstress. She used to do embroidery herself and beading. And she gave this to me and she said, I brought this back for you. And I said, well, first of all, I don't even know what the meaning is. And Mom, I said, it's one color, it's yellow. There's not much to it, right? It's pretty basic. She said, well, I want you to just do something with it. And she gave it to me. It took me almost 3 years to finish this. It's almost more challenging to do because it's one color and it's very monotonous. But I realized every bead that I sewed on, I thought of her. I thought about her experience. I thought about her when she was a child. She was working sweatshops, sweat factory, right? She did this to get out of poverty. That's how she became a seamstress. She was so poor as a child laborer. And here she travels back and brings me back this simple embroidery. And so I had to finish it. I had to complete it. I had it custom framed and I gave it back to her. And this is traditionally hanging on her mantle. And I hope that she remembers when she sees this, how much I love her. And even though it's simple, I had to share, it's more than that. It went back to her home. It came from her home place and it came all the way to the States. And I feel like I could at least do this for my mother. And so she has really given me the gift of great fortune, which is what really this means. So I wanted to share this with everybody. Thank you. Now I have the honor of introducing my dear friend, Laura Judd. She's a Chinese Lithuanian American and TPAC member and superstar co-organizer of this exhibit. She's recently moved to Duluth with her husband and 2 sons and was first drawn to the Asian social group for a sense of community, familiarity, togetherness, family, and home. While it's comforting, she says, to be among people with similarities like me, like you, demonstrates that we all have something in common with one another. Getting to know one another is just one way to start finding those connecting points. She's excited for the possibilities of visitors celebrating Asian cultures, having cross-cultural conversations, gaining new perspectives, and possibly forming new friendships and viewing the exhibit together. She'll be talking about the ribbon tree that she helped put together with Pakou.
Thank you, Sharon, and for everyone who is joining tonight. I am so honored to be a part of this exhibit. And while I'm not one of the artists that has something of my own creation on exhibit, I was really excited to be a part and joined up for the organizing team in whatever way I could because of that excitement to celebrate Asian cultures and to have that togetherness. But really, it started with the collecting of photos for the collage, the canvases, and getting that together that Julia had already mentioned, Viann will talk about. And then also I helped with those canoes for the rice grains on the origami piece. And then one of Sharon podcast interviews, because I just thought, yes, like I want to share and celebrate as much as I can. But as you're looking now, there's this ribbon tree because the name of this exhibit is Like Me, Like You. And while we are celebrating all the Asian cultures that came together to put this exhibit on and share different pieces of our own personal stories, we also feel like those personal stories reach out to others and to the broader community. And so we would love to invite you to come see the exhibit in person. And also here's this ribbon tree at the end, and to take one of the ribbons and tie it on the tree. Just become a part of the community in that very literal, tangible sense where you're taking the ribbon and joining it with the others that are on there. And there's also fabric markers there if you would like to add a word or a phrase of something that you think of with the exhibit or part of your story or your name, or you can also leave it blank. Some of them are just on there to be a part of it in that way too, in a quieter way. So please just come see and come join and grow this community that we have growing now. So next is an artist, Kim Nordin, who is a part of this exhibit as well. And she asked if she could tell you a little bit more about herself. So Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being curious and for joining us tonight. I think I'll just start with just a little bit about me. I was adopted when I was a baby, and I've lived in Duluth ever since. I started my jewelry business about a year ago, and I named it Soul and Stone. Soul for my birthplace, and Stone, the name of my son, and also because I use stones in my jewelry. The three pieces that I have in the show are copper electroformed, which is a process of fusing copper onto another medium and using low voltage charge to essentially just grow the copper where you want it to go. I love the organic beauty and healing properties found in natural objects, so that's really been my inspiration. This project was really hard for me to complete. I made probably 10 different things and none of them felt right, but I finally settled on these pieces, and it really got me thinking about my identity and the feelings that I have around being Asian and being adopted. And it's taken a lot of courage to open up and be vulnerable. But thankfully now I have this web of other people and artists that have similar experiences and stories. And I'm just so grateful to be in this show. So as I was reflecting upon my identity as a Korean adoptee, growing up and living in Duluth and surviving a pandemic, I really wanted to use a powerful stone on this project, and I chose labradorite for the ring and the necklace. Labradorite's often called a stone of transformation, which I think is a good representation of where I am personally, as well as where we are just as humans. It's said to heal from within, increase faith and trust, and it's a great protection stone against negativity and evil. I guess this project has helped me work on healing some of the trauma that comes with being an adoptee, as well as growing up in a very white community, which takes faith in humankind and trust in my own ability to create change. The bracelet is made from a fern that grows near my house. There's an actual fern underneath that copper, which I think is just so cool. And keshi pearls are said to teach you to open up and find the meaning and the purpose of your true self. And in some Asian cultures, pearls represent the journey of the soul or the spirit. And that's really all I have. So thanks for listening. I'm So grateful for the opportunity to share a bit about my true self with you. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat box or if we have time later. So I will turn things over to the next artist, the beautiful poet, Sharon Kwan.
My name is Sharon Huang, and I was born and raised in Southern California. My parents are Chinese immigrants from China. And growing up in Southern California and going to school there, I had the opportunity of interacting with a lot of students from all over the world, Latin American students, Mexican students, Asians from all over different parts of Asia, Middle East. And that carried me through because I think we bonded through food and culture. And by the time I got to college, Cal Poly Pomona, I actually get to have more one-on-one with them. And they tell me how they escaped the guerrillas in Guatemala. And some of them escaped the oppressive government and the injustice in the Middle East because they're women. So they came to the US so they can have the freedom, the things that the Constitution offers us, and that we don't even have to think about it in a day-to-day. But for these women, they do have to think about it every day because their freedom is always at stake. And especially if you're a female, you don't have the same rights as males. And so I started thinking, when I talk to them and everything, we're not all that different. We are all the same in some ways. We want clean water, clean air, safe environment, safe schools. We want meaningful, fulfilling work in a non-toxic work environment. So we have a lot of the same commonalities. And I feel that sometimes we lose sight of what we have in common by focusing too much on what we have that's different. So instead of focusing on something that's different, you focus on something that you have in common and build from it and have that strength and to move forward. And that's how we get things done. That's how I feel, how I connected with people they're from a different background. Because at the end of the day, I find out we all have so much in common. We have the same wants and needs. I'm going to turn this over to Viann Nguyen-Feng. She is a professor at UMD.
Thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to speak a little bit about two of the pieces, Like Me, Like You, Part 1 and Part 2. So as Julia and Laura mentioned, these works took form because of a collective of Twin Ports, APIDA folks, and allies. So I'm simply just honored to be able to speak to these works today and to have been able to see these concepts, these ideas that we've all been talking about materialize because of this community. So really, I'm just a spokesperson for everyone that you can see in this collage and beyond. So I will actually paste in the chat the names and contributions of everyone who was involved. So you can see that this is really a group collaboration. So with this slide of photographs on canvases, this is a collage of our community. So we have our TPAC logo on one side, as well as a logo that we designed for this exhibit, which was a yin-yang symbol to symbolize like me, like you. With the different pieces, with their spacing, it points to the sense that we might seem disconnected, but together we are like each other. So even with those gaps, this makes a meaningful whole. So then the next part, Part 2, so this is origami or paper folding, because it wasn't only Japanese origami per se, but also Chinese paper folding that altogether looks like our logo, which is a grain of rice. So as you zoom in, you can see different faces, different activities that we all enjoy. So again, I'm just humbled and honored to be able to discuss this and have had this concept materialize. And so I'm now going to introduce Aya Kawaguchi. Aya received her BFA from Tokyo Zokai University in 1998, an MFA from Tokyo National University of Arts in 2000. She has exhibited in Honolulu, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Tokyo, Buenos Aires, San Francisco, and many other cities. So I will pass it along to you.
Thank you, Viann. Thank you so much for this opportunity tonight. My name is Aya Kawaguchi. I was born in Japan and moved to Duluth in 2005 because of my husband's job. I have two daughters and has been experienced this extreme cold weather for 16 years now. Anyway, I would like to talk about my work a little bit. So I have been producing mainly paintings and drawings, and my works are based on the idea of updating the landscape or scenery. So in Japanese dictionary, the simple definition of the word landscape also includes both physical scene as well as psychological integration with harmonious nature, such as something more pleasing to your eyes or pleasing state of condition that is in harmony. So then I started thinking about what I'm really seeing in the scenery in everyday life. And this dualism became an important concept for me to investigate and deconstruct my experience with cultural and social background. So with my recent project, the final pieces are paintings or drawings, but most of the time I use my photographs. So in this exhibition, you can see 4 watercolor paintings and 2 glass paintings. The most images are from, as you can see, those are the glass paintings. Most images are from the nature in Duluth when I hiked Hartley Nature Center or some other places. And at these places, I take pictures kind of randomly and download it to my computer, then start working on my piece. And usually there are many information in the photograph. So I start getting rid of some unnecessary things, which I don't want to be in my final image, and extracting or adding some important elements. So I do many addition and subtraction process on paper or canvas or glass, then try to transform an original photograph into a more personal and meaningful state. This is about my work, and thank you for listening and for this opportunity tonight. And I'm so honored to be a part of this show. So I'm gonna pass this to Amy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Aya, and thank you all once again to each of the artists for being here tonight and participating in this exhibition. I think Julia said it so well when she announced that there's been a deeper joy and truth throughout this exhibition. And I hope that all of the artists have felt that. I know I certainly have enjoyed getting to know each of you a little bit, or some of you a little bit more than others. And I'm really appreciative of such a welcoming community. I didn't see a lot of questions coming up in chat, just a lot of support. Everything from reading Sharon's poem, being such a marvelous talent. Kim, your jewelry is just absolutely stunning. Many, many comments about what a beautiful gift this exhibit is and how amazing, and so many people are looking forward to seeing it in person. So I'll just throw it out there one more time that our galleries are open 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. And this work will be on view through mid-March. And we do have time for questions. So if anyone wants to jump in, we can certainly pass those to the artists. And while everyone's thinking, I was hoping that someone could talk a little bit more in detail about your logo, because that was one of the first interactions I had with TPAC. And I was really blown away by the process the collective works in terms of its collaboration and its strong commitment to inclusivity. Perhaps, I don't know if Viann would be the right person to speak on that, or if someone else could jump in.
I can speak to that, although I also want to emphasize again that it was a group process, as you mentioned, Amy. Essentially, there were a couple of Qualtrics surveys that got sent forth to the TPAC community in terms of ideas, in terms of like what kind of symbol. And then once we had decided on a rice stalk, it was like, how would that look? So one of the reasons we chose a rice stalk is because it's something that is carried forth throughout Asia in terms of being a staple. And it stands in the wind, it's resilient, it feeds us, it feeds our souls, feeds our communities. It's kind of one that's bent in the wind, but staying there, stable. So we also voted on colors, and we wanted to make sure it was accessible to all. So we did the color blindness tests and all that jazz. We even picked the font as a vote, and it just happened that the name of that font is Collective. So it just all coalesced together to this simple yet deep logo, I believe. But others would like to share thoughts. I would love to hear them too.
I was also, certainly anyone can jump in at any time with additional information, but I was also wondering, and again, anyone can answer this question. A lot of you at one point or another had mentioned that you don't feel like you're artists, and this is such a new experience for you. I'm wondering if anyone could speak about that vulnerability piece, because many artists know that it can be a barrier to sharing your work with the public because it is so personal. Would anyone care to share about that?
This is Laura, and I was one of those people that said I wasn't an artist in this, and I just wanted to make sure to give credit where credit is due. You know, like there was all those photographs that were a part of what Viann was just showing with the canvases or the origami. So there were many contributors, but it was Viann's vision. She created those canvases, or she had that idea to make it the folded paper and brought it to life. And so I really, even though there were many of us contributing, I really think of her as like the visionary and the artist. And so I just wanted to give that nod. Viann, that was you. So that's why, and same with the podcast, you know, that's Sharon's vision that she is bringing this to life. So just want to give it the credit where credit's due, I felt like.
Yes, it's hard to, yeah, because we're such a collective, as the name speaks of, and as the name of the exhibit says, like me, like you, it's no singular person, it's no I, it's us. So everyone, TPAC, DAI, our allies, we all co-created this, and I've been very humbled to be a part of it.
Well, Viann, we did actually have a question about the scale of the rice logo, and I'm assuming the question is referring to the installation of the origami piece.
Yes. Hi, Cheryl. Cheryl's a fellow UMDer. So both of the part 1 and part 2 are both about 5 feet by 5 feet. So I think they're larger than how they might look on the screen. It's lots of teamwork to make it that large. So if you come in person, you can see it.
Right, it does take up an 8 by 8 foot wall. I think it goes to the creative spirit that is in all of us. Where there is a story to be told, we will find a way to do it in a meaningful and memorable, beautiful way. I certainly think that really speaks towards this exhibition.
This is Pakou, and I would just like to add that that's one of TPAC's goals, is to continue to share, educate, advocate, and build a stronger community by sharing our culture, our heritage, our stories with the Twin Ports community. And so we really do welcome everyone to the exhibit, no matter what age. And you can always communicate with us. Find us on Facebook at TPAC 2021. We would love to be able to talk to people individually or present as groups.
Thank you, Pakou. That is such great information, because I was wondering what could be the next steps in terms of being a supportive, inclusive community. And certainly sounds like we can hop on your Facebook page and reach out. It sounds like some of you would make yourselves available for interactions with people that would be interested. We could certainly do some private tours in the galleries. We could rotate through anyone that was interested in seeing it and meet up with artists, of course, masked, depending on where we go with all this. As of late, I love that there is a next step available. So thank you, Pakou. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a really lovely evening. As sad as I am that we weren't able to meet in person, I think bringing the venue online, we were able to reach out to more people than we probably would have been able to in the gallery space. So I'm really glad that we were able to meet tonight.
This is Christina. Before we go, there's one more piece that I would like to make sure we say thank you about, and that is to our grantors. The Minnesota State Arts Board and BMPP and the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council are all grantors to this project. And I'd like to especially thank the League of Women Voters for helping to get the word out about this exhibition and bring in our community to be available for both Beth and all of the artists in the Like Me, Like You exhibition. Thank you so much. Amy, do you have any other closing thoughts? I just wanted to make sure we get our grantors in there.
Sure. Please come see the exhibitions in person. It's definitely worth the trip downtown, and feel free to knock on my door because I'm always willing to talk to visitors. And then feel free to reach out to the TPAC Facebook page and become more involved with their community. So thank you, everyone.